So this is both a kind of review and further step with some web scraping and some introductory natural language processing stuff using TextBlob. So the end game is to scrape a bunch of reviews of old punk rock records from MaximumRocknRoll and assess the sentiment of these reviews. So to start, I'm going to just add a couple of things in terms of the natural language processing and TextBlob stuff that maybe we didn't get to do in class. So first I can just import TextBlob, and then let's say that I have a string here, like this string of text. Hennessy is happy it's getting cold out. Saved as the variable text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this to this function, this TextBlob thing, and save it as blob. And by doing that, I've turned this into a TextBlob object that I can subsequently access a bunch of TextBlob methods from. For example, after I have this blob, I can see what the words of it are. I can change it all to uppercase. I can investigate the sentiment of it, and so on and so on. So if I wanted to see what all of these methods are available, if I do blob and tab, you can see there are a whole bunch of other things available to us as well. You know, if I want to see the part of speech tags, you can see that for each of these words. So for all the information about this, just go to the TextBlob documentation. It contains all the information about all of the methods, etc. But it also has a nice little quick start here that shows you how to get going with some of the basics. So you can see that, like, sentiment, this idea of polarity, right? If I think about this sentence here, there is potentially an emotional word. Happy is descriptive of, like, Hennessy's emotion, you know. So there's some sort of subjective language going on here. She has a feeling about something. But if I have a sentence like "My soup was made with tomato and beans," that has absolutely, it's just there's no sentiment in this. It's purely subjective, right? And I do the same thing. I make this into a TextBlob object and look at the sentiment. You see that the polarity and subjectivity scores are both 0 here. So that's the idea. The polarity and subjectivity increase with their existence of subjective or polarizing vocabulary in the text. A very basic thing that we may want to know also is just about the word counts. So we can count the words with the word count method, and we get back a dictionary that contains the words and the counts. If I want to access these, for example, if I just wanted to make a plot of these, what I can do is I can save the word counts as a variable, and then I can access the words through the key method and the values through the values method. So then I can pass these things to matplotlib bar plot, for example, and get a little basic plot here. Okay. So another example would be this is a CSV file of Yelp reviews. See, I have 1,000 different Yelp reviews. And if I look at this, the text is where the review is. So if I look at the first one, I see here is a review. And this seems like a positive review. It was excellent, absolute pleasure, excellent, so on and so on and so on, right? So if we wanted to use TextBlob to look at this, again, what we would do is we would just save this text. So here's one way to refer to that. Turn it into a TextBlob object, and then I can look at the word counts, the words, I can look at the sentences, and the sentiment. So you see that this has like 0.4 and 0.66, like these are higher, these are much higher scores than what we saw earlier. And as they should be, right? This is a positive review. There's a lot of objective words being used, or non-objective words being used, and yeah. So similarly, if we wanted to make our own kind of sentiment analyzer, we could do it very easily. And so here's a very basic example. Like if I had a collection of positive words, like best, great, loved, excellent, pleasure, phenomenal, and if I had a bunch of negative words, worst, bad, hated, terrible, miserable, awful, gross, what I could do just the same is go and here I just grabbed the different words, the individual words that were used in that first review. And we'll loop through those words and we'll say, okay, if any of these words occur, I'll add 1 to my score, and if any of these words occur, I'll subtract 1 from the score. And if I do that, I get a score of 4. So that means there's, much more positive. If this is the universe of all possible positive words, and if this were the all possible negative words, then this would show me that it's a fairly positive review. Now you could think of some ways that you might want to extend this. It doesn't take into account how many words there were. So maybe you want to figure out relative to how many words there were to be considered, how many were positive or negative. And there's probably some further kind of normalization to be done from there. And that's in essence what we see kind of happening with some of these scores. And you can read more about how these are computed at the TextBlob documentation. Okay, so back to the record reviews. We want to go and scrape MaximumRocknRoll, the reviews, and investigate the sentiment of them. So first is this page has this URL. It's the reviews URL. We pass this to requests, turn it into a beautiful soup thing, and then this first piece here. The idea is that I'm going to go ahead and grab all of this whole page, this whole thing that has the grid of all of these albums on it. And from there, I'm going to go through, because what I really want is, so for example, here's this Ebenezer and the Bludgeons record. I want to actually get the review of the thing on the page that is linked to from there. So to do that, I'm gonna follow that link, and I know that these links are in A tags. So if I inspect this thing here, this is the link to that review. So my goal is to grab this page, and then I'll rip through that content in the A tags to grab these URLs that then I will subsequently pass and scrape each of those pages. Alright, so first let's just see how to get these URLs. And this piece is what grabs me all of the whole page. Okay, this gives me the whole page. And so like I said, I want to grab from those hyperlinks, those A tags, the href, this thing. This is what I'm interested in, this URL. So it's inside of an A tag, and it is part of what I'll say is the href attribute. This is an attribute of this A tag. So I can access these different attributes with the attribute method. Like, so here what I'm saying is I want to find in that grid the first A tag's attribute that is an href, because there can be more things besides for just an href in there. We've seen other labels. So for here, in this header, there are 2 attributes. There's a class and there's a role. Okay, and there's a role and an ID in this one. But here we just have an href. So it's in the A tag in this whole page. So again, this is the whole page. This is the A tag, and this is grabbing from its attributes the hyperreference, that URL. So that's how to get that thing. So because this whole thing, this is just the first one. I want all of them. So next, what I'll do is I'll save all of the A tags, the result list, the result set of all the A tags, and then I'll just loop through there and get each individual href. Okay, so after saving these links, the first link there has an href attribute that is this. So if I loop through all of these links, which is this whole page, I go through and I get this Revolution Girl Style Now is going to be on there. Right? And again, it's just there's an A tag and an href that takes me there. Okay, so if we were to loop through all of those links and just grab the hrefs, we should see the URLs, and sure enough, here they are. Like, here are all these different records. Okay? So next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to take these URLs. I want to be able to go to HTTP MaximumRocknRoll, the Secret Prostitutes LP, and get the review. So then if we look at one of these review pages, let's go back to Ebenezer and the Bludgeons. Alright, this is what we want here. And, you know, I think that maybe I also want the title. So this, if I look, it's an H2. So once I go to this page and I get this page, I'll grab the H2 and see if that doesn't give me the album name. And then the review itself is going to be here. Here, and where is that? Where did I find that? That ended up being in, in its article. It's the article. So once we, and again, like all I'm doing here is just grabbing one of those URLs and playing around. And so get that URL, turn it into a response, make it a soup object, and this article here has everything in it, right? So if I look at the H2, that is the title, and if I look at the article, it is this review. So now we're ready to go. Now I'm just gonna, I start at this main page, I get the response, turn it into a soup. I get all of those URLs. Then I loop through those URLs, I grab the href, and get a response with it. I did two things in once here. I grabbed a hyperreference from the A tag and pass it to a request. Then I turn that into a beautiful soup object. And then I have these lists here, and so I'm going to add each review. I'm going to append each review to this review list and append each title to this title list. And from there, I'll be able to create a data frame out of that with just those lists. So here I'm just saying this is a column named album that's going to have the titles in it, and this is a column named review that will have the reviews in it, and here they are. Okay, and it looks like we have 150 reviews. If I look, here's review 0, and that was about hex poison in the system. So yeah, so now we got our reviews. We can go ahead and analyze them. right? For example, if I take this first review and turn it into a text blob and look at the sentences, here I have all of the stuff in the review. If I look at the sentiment of that, it's 0.35 and 0.60. So this seems to be maybe a record to look into. Yeah, so then what I'm going to do is I want to create another column called polarity and called subjectivity that contain the scores for each of those reviews. So again, I'm going to use that same kind of thing where I create an empty list and I loop through all of the reviews and tack on to these the polarity and subjectivity score for each review. So I'm just going through each review in that column, turning it into a text blob object and appending the polarity and subjectivity to these lists. And then I'll add those as columns of my data frame here. And if we now take a look at that data frame, if we take a look at reviews, we've got a couple of other columns. We've got this polarity and this subjectivity column. So maybe you wanted to know about, maybe you thought that a good review would be something with a high polarity score. So we could say reviews n largest 5 on polarity, and maybe these are the see what albums they are. So, and then if I wanted more information about them, I could grab the grab them by these columns, but or by these rows. And if I wanted to plot and see, you know, are these how do these scores kind of play out overall? Well, I could make a scatter plot of polarity versus subjectivity. We could make a histogram of the polarity scores. So like reviews, and we're grabbing polarity. So most of them were in this kind of 0 to 0.2 region. Some of them were out here to 0.3. So those at 0.3 and above are unique. So these are maybe rare reviews. Similarly, there's some that are there's some that are negative. Maybe we want to find those. So we can look for those, saying reviews, and we can use our filter here, polarity, and just say less than 0. And here they are. Okay, slugga. So maybe we want to look at slugga. That would be reviews. And I'm going to do iloc because I know that that's in row 34. Okay, and maybe I want the review. And stupid, short, and direct, I don't know. Right. Well, you want to hear it in the morning, apparently. So, anyway, that's a little bit of kind of exploring some text here. If we look overall, we can see that the average polarity and subjectivity scores, well, subjectivity was about 0.5 and polarity was lower. We can look at the word counts. and do all of the other things using TextBlob on these reviews. So that's that for kind of an introduction to scraping, and then using that scraping to feed into some natural language processing. We'll look more at this next class. Yep.